Hello, I want to show you how to create a more complicated custom GPT. And here's an example, and it has to do with adding reference materials as attachments to your custom GPT. So let me give you the specific example. I teach various classes, and in one of the capstone classes, I help prepare students for the actual interviews that they're going to. So particularly technical interviews. So I have this custom chat GPT that I created called Job Advice. I have a couple of them. And this specific one helps them answer the question of needing to be able to sell their accomplishments using the challenge action results formula for answering behavioral questions. So behavioral questions are like, tell me a time when you solved a problem for a client, or something, or resolved this particular problem. So a formula taught is talk about a challenge you had, what actions you took, and what results happened from those actions. And so I took this ChatGPT and I took my own advice and put it into the ChatGPT. I took insights from Madeline Mann, who has a YouTube channel here, highly recommend it, all about HR advice, particularly in jobs and job interviews and searches. Very well done. So I took some of her advice and put it into this. And so now the user has three experts, me, Madeline Mann, and AI that can then help them in this specific task, which is answering job interview questions using the challenge action results formula. So you see that there are things that I could choose here that I built in, as in show me an example or reference something. I'm going to take a poor example, and let's say that this is a student who answered the question. They could even use the dictate dialog box and role play a little bit, but here's an example. So we'll see how then this custom chat GPT then analyzes it, so you can get a feel when I start talking about how I built it. So it analyzes it, gives them a little bit of information. It uses a rubric that I created. Notice I wanted it to label me, and so that the student knows that I'm involved in this process. I created a rubric. It graded based on, or evaluated, excuse, not a grade, evaluated it based on the rubric and where it needs improvements, and then started giving some specific advice. And I told the ChatGPT specifically, quote me when appropriately, and I gave it several quotes related to common problems that I see, as well as motivational things and other things. And then the AI goes through and gives some additional advice with examples, and again quotes me because I specifically said to quote me. So you can see this is a lot more complicated now of a chat GPT, and it took me actually half a day to iterate through and test. And here's what I wanted to show you. Now that you've seen the front end, let's look at the back end of this custom GPT so I can talk to you about how I used reference materials in that. So I'm going to click over here on the left under Explore and go to My GPTs. The purpose of this is to show you how to use reference materials beyond just the instructions. Okay, and so we're going to edit this one, challenge action results. We'll edit that. And you'll see here that I have two knowledge attachments, and I can upload more. You can upload up to 20 files. Each file, I believe, has a limit of 512 megabytes. You just need to search, ask ChatGPT. It'll tell you what the limits are. But you can upload these reference files to help the chatbot then do what you're asking it to do. So these reference files could be like an employee manual, or a standard operating procedure manual, or a instruction or build manual, or law files, or briefs, or reference materials, anything you can think of that's specific to the task that you're building in. Again, we're not creating these custom GPTs that do everything. We're tightly focused on one specific task, and we give it the reference materials it needs for that specific task. So let's just go through this. Of course, you know how to create a little icon, and you give it a name, and you give it a description that's talks about what this does, and you have some instructions, and you'll see that I have some instructions. I'm following the master prompt formula that you have learned. And who are you? Act as an experienced HR consultant, such as Madeline Mann from this YouTube channel. Context, and then I gave it context about what this does. And criteria, I gave it what the success criteria looks like. You're familiar with this and from the previous chapters, but basically I'm summarizing what this is doing. Here's the source, because I want to credit much of this content came from Madeline Mann in her YouTube video, and I wanted to reference that YouTube video because if students need extra material, I want them to go and to watch these videos, as that's part of one of the homework assignments that I do. And so training, so I'm giving some, this is where I break off of the standard formula, because I want to give some extra training about CAR, which is challenge action results. And so I have summarized this learning so that the chat bot here knows what the challenge action results is and tips about that. Then here I added some frequent problems and advice from Dr. Humphreys, but notice I didn't insert it. I said, see the attached documents. If missing, omit. So in other words, if information is missing from the attached documents, don't invent stuff, because I had some instructions saying, quote me. And if it couldn't find my quote, it started inventing things that I said that I didn't say. So over iterative processes, I found out two things. One, I had too many instructions to fit in here. I believe you can only have 10,000 characters in this instructions, and I had like 20,000, 30,000 characters of instructions. So I needed an attachment. So in the instructions files here, I said, see the attached documents, and then, but if it's still missing, omit this instruction here. Examples, I wanted to give, in the master formula, we know that we need examples. Well, there are too many examples to fit in the 10,000 instructions, 10,000 characters. So I said, see the attached for quality examples, poor examples. If missing, you can provide examples and state that the examples are your creation. So here I'm giving license to the AI to saying, okay, here's where you can invent. Don't invent something I said, but you can invent good and bad examples. Here's my rubric. So I've created this rubric on different criteria for evaluating a CAR formula, and here's the specific instructions. Read the instructions, say some variation, write, read the student's response, include Dr. Humphreys' rubric. Quote Dr. Humphreys' personal example at least once. Where does it get it? From the attachment files. Include a quote from Dr. Humphreys. And do not assume the student wants to rewrite their response. Instead, ask. So I've started building in these instructions as I tested the system and added to instructions. And I gave the response format. I wanted the rubric to be used first. I want to give some advice, AI to give some advice. Then they have to see some of the frequent problems and quote Dr. Humphreys, and then add an additional relative quote by Dr. Humphreys. So now where does this stuff come from? This comes at almost the limit of the instructions you can put in to a custom chat GPT. So I needed additional reference files. So here's my additional reference files. I keep them all here as Markdown files. They could be PDF, they could be Word, whatever you wanted, but I wanted Markdown files so it was fast and easy. And I have one for a master prompt, which you just read. And then here's Dr. Humphreys' advice and good and bad examples, which I pull up in Notepad++. It's a free, great text editor that I really, really like. You can use whatever you want. But here I listed off good examples, and I listed off a poor examples. So then the system that's the test case. So I'll come back to that in a moment. Let's go to Dr. Humphreys' advice. And here is Dr. Humphrey's advice. I gave several things that I specifically wanted to look at and for the student to know and quote me on. So here's a problem. If the AI finds this problem, then here's my Humphrey's advice. If the AI finds this problem, I want the AI to quote Dr. Humphrey's advice. And that way I stay in the loop of giving the advice. And here's some examples according to Miss Mann and to Dr. Humphreys. And I give some good and poor examples that the AI can draw from. So that's how I solved the problem of the instructions were too long to fit in the instructions box. Second piece of advice is create some test use cases. So as I said, this took me about half a day to iterate through finding problems, some things that didn't work, or adding some capabilities. And it, like for example, it stopped quoting me and started inventing things that I didn't say. So I had to work through that process. And so in that, I created this test case file with several examples of good and poor cases, so that as I was testing and I would update, so you come here, you make the changes, or I upload a new file, I press update, and then I could go and take a good example, test it. I could come in here, copy in, and after I've updated it, then test a good example, test a bad example, and then that way I can say, is it really working the way I want? So I probably did dozens of tests to make sure that the chatbot that this custom GPT is behaving in the way that I wanted to it. And then when I saw, okay, nope, it's missing this up, I'd come over here and either change the instructions, or I would change something in one of these reference files, click update, and have it test it again. So that's what I did. And the points in summarizing this again is you can create some complicated examples, max out these instructions, and using the master formula, reference, if you need the instructions to reference something, say it, and upload your reference files here. You can add additional instructions or additional reference materials by clicking upload, and I believe you can have 20 of those. And then the third and final step is do lots of testing. Create little test case so that every time you make a change, you can always go back to these test case and see, did this work? Did this not work? And then that way you create awesome custom GPTs that work consistently, and you work out all the bugs and become very valuable to you. Enjoy.